Let me just get a sip of coffee. Hey, Karen, Dion, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I know that you are a co-founder of the Thrive community and that you're involved with the Sinclair method, um, and which is a really incredible way for people to safely reduce their alcohol consumption, and to eventually, for people that are looking to completely quit alcohol, it's a great way to do it without the trauma of cold turkey quitting and withdrawal. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how you came to this point of being involved with the Sinclair method and Thrive.
Yeah, great question. So I was, just to give you a little history, my original challenge in life was I had an eating disorder as a teenager. And so I struggled with that for about a decade. And it was really my first introduction to, I guess, what we would call harm reduction, in the sense that, when you have a addiction to food, in a sense, you can't really stop eating. Right. And so you have to figure out a way to have a healthier relationship with food. And so I worked through that in my 20s, and it became a passion of mine. And so I ended up going back to school and getting my degree and certification and license to become an addiction counselor. And so my goal at that time was to work with people with disordered eating and help them, find a better relationship with food. In my clinical training as an addiction counselor, I ended up working in a state-run facility here in Montana who were working with mostly people with alcohol addiction who are court-ordered due to getting a DUI. And so I did that for a year, my clinical internship there. So I had exposure to mostly alcohol addiction, some other addictions, but it was primarily alcohol, but through a court-ordered system. And the bulk of my training was 12 steps, abstinence-based, pretty straightforward in terms of the traditional types of treatment. And what I saw along the way is that most of my clients were not getting help. They were reluctantly attending the meetings because they were required to, reluctantly attending outpatient. But in terms of their success, it was really minimal. And also through that period of time, I came to realize that although I didn't feel like I fell in a category of alcoholism or alcohol use disorder, that I had some of the qualities in my relationship with alcohol that were unhealthy. And so it was kind of an evolution during that time where I was learning more about traditional treatment. Because being a harm reductionist, I would speak up in some of the meetings and get, promptly shut down. I remember, there was a Suboxone clinic in town for people who were struggling with heroin. And in my peer group there with other counselors, that facility was actually mocked and made fun of. It's not real recovery. And so I just remember, really feeling like traditional treatment was really pigeonholing people into, one size fits all for everyone. And I actually ended up leaving. I finished my clinical internship, got my license, and I left the field because I looked at the counselors that were my peers. They were mostly unhealthy. They were in unhealthy relationships. They were still struggling with alcohol cravings. They were going out the back door and chain smoking every chance they could get. And I just thought, there's really nothing. I felt like I didn't have anything to offer my clients, that, they weren't getting help from the system. The counselors themselves weren't healthy. And I thought, I just really don't have anything here to offer. And I thought at the time, well, maybe I just wasted my time, but I'm going to take this information that I learned and I'm going to find the nuggets of wisdom and move on. And so I ended up going into preventative medicine and getting my postgraduate certification in health and wellness coaching through a company called Well Coaches, and working for the local hospital for about 7 years in preventative health. And my specialty was addiction. So I worked in smoking cessation. I worked with disordered eating. And of course, alcohol abuse was, part of that as well. And so I was still working very much behaviorally in the field in terms of helping people change their lifestyle, change their identity, change their habits, those kinds of things. But at the same time, I was still struggling with my own drinking. And again, I didn't fall into the category of what I felt like was an alcoholic, because I was still going to work. I was still participating in triathlons. I was still, my life was very functional, but I knew I wasn't at my best because I was drinking probably 2 to 3 to 4 glasses of wine, 4 or 5 nights a week. Right. So it was more of a kind of a chronic problem for me, rather than I wasn't a binge drinker. It was more of just something like a lifestyle for me, but I wasn't feeling well as I was, getting into my later 40s, and I was, waking up with hangovers many days of the week. And so I started taking a look again at my own drinking and started making some changes based on the tools I had learned both as a counselor and as a coach. I started tracking my drinks. I started setting limits for myself. I started working on filling my life with other more positive activities. And I made a lot of progress. So my drinking actually decreased. And I was at that point probably drinking, maybe 3 glasses of wine 3 nights a week. But what I noticed is it was a real struggle. So I had to really work hard to stay within my limits. I thought about drinking all the time, and it just felt like it wasn't sustainable. Like it felt like it was just so much work for me to have to stay within these, guidelines that I set for myself. And every now and then I would drink beyond that limit, and it was unpredictable and unexpected. And sometimes I would, say or do things that I regretted the next day. Right. So I listened to a podcast of yours, and I don't know who it was with, Dr. Leeds, recently, but you talked a lot about gray area drinking and the gray area drinker. And I would definitely categorize myself as that. And one of the things that really was poignant in that interview that I heard you say is that, the consequence with gray area drinkers is it's kind of like a long, slow burn, right? You don't really have the impetus to make a dramatic change because you're not hitting any kind of rock bottom, or you're not having huge consequences in life, but you just kind of underperform and, lead kind of more of a mediocre life, right? You just don't do the things that you might have done otherwise. And I definitely found that was the case for me. I didn't have any real dramatic aha moments or confrontations from my family. Nobody thought that I was drinking problematically but myself, but I knew that I just wasn't at my best. Right. And so again, I didn't really see in traditional treatment that was an option for me. It didn't feel like I felt like I fell into that category and I needed to just quit drinking altogether, but certainly it was impacting my life negatively. And so in the course of working as a health and wellness coach for the hospital and working with my clients, I did, I was always doing research for, the new supplements or new techniques to help my clients. And one day I just came across Claudia Christian's TED Talk, and I don't even know how I got there. I just found it online. And I remember still to this day, and this has been over 6 years ago, hearing her TED Talk and being like, it was like a light bulb went off. It just made so much sense. And I thought, I've got to give this a try. And so I did. And within a very short period of time after starting the medication, naltrexone, taken 1 hour before drinking, I was a very fast responder. Within 90 days, I had about 40 to 45 extinction sessions, and we can talk more about what those are in a minute. But extinction session is basically when you take the medication and you have an alcoholic beverage. Within 3 months, I felt like my addiction or my problem with alcohol was gone. It just, the obsessive thoughts, the cravings, the desire for alcohol was just gone. And to me, it felt miraculous, because having kind of battled this for a number of years, it just felt like the missing piece for me. I didn't have to fight these urges and cravings. And for me, it was as much about the obsessive thoughts. Even on days that I wasn't drinking, or long stretches, I would have long stretches where I would, do juice fasts and things like that. But I could never really get over the obsessive thoughts about alcohol and the looking forward to the day I could drink again. And that was just gone. This medication and this method, it's almost like it erased it from my brain. The memory from my brain. And so once that happened, I thought, well, this is my life's work. Like, people need to know about this. I still, to this day, the question that I get asked all the time is, why, if this works so well, why haven't I heard of it? And I do have answers for that now, but at the time, I went through clinical training as an addiction counselor, and naltrexone was never mentioned once, ever,
Yeah.
in my training. And so, I made it my mission at that point. I made the decision that this is what I was going to do somehow, some way. I didn't really know at the time how I was going to get the word out. But it began that process. I started working as a coach one-on-one with people. I worked for, you may be familiar with sinclairmethod.org. So they provide the medication for patients across the country. And so I did coaching for them, for their TSM patients, for several years. And then started collaborating with Katie Lane, who is another TSM success story, about a year and a half ago to 2 years ago. And she and I, our mission was really to create a comprehensive program that would take somebody through the very first time they've heard about TSM all the way to, being resolved with their addiction to alcohol, which is what we call pharmacological extinction. And she and I wanted to create something that would walk someone through it step by step, because what we had both found in our journeys is we really had to piecemeal the information together, and find what would work for us. And, both of us made mistakes along the way, and, had things that could have been avoided, had we had more information. And so that was the birth of Thrive Alcohol Recovery, and the Thrive community. And now we are fully active and supporting hundreds of members now through this journey. So it's been, coming full circle now after 6 years. It's been just a real blessing for me to be able to help other people with this process as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Something that you talked about, gray area drinking, and people, probably not feeling like, there's probably a lot of people that drink a little bit too much, or they even drink at all, and things would be a lot better for them if they did not drink. And but they don't really see themselves as having a problem. They may even have someone in the family with a really bad addiction problem. The black sheep of the family. They're like, oh, look at him or her. They really have a problem. That person really needs to be in meetings and be in rehab. We need to stage an intervention. And they'll may never look at themselves and see that, when they go out to dinner, that they're having one glass of wine after another. And and it's really, and maybe people in that situation, like in how you were, maybe they'll respond better than anyone to naltrexone. And just imagine the productivity and people achieving their dreams and doing great things with their lives if they could just stop drinking that little bit, or going out and binging every once in a while. And yeah, that's like I mean, there's so many people, it's not just the alcoholic, the person that had to go to rehab, or was told they have to go to meetings. It's not just those people that can benefit from a community like Thrive. I mean, maybe there's just a huge number of people out there that could really benefit from some guidance and learning about this, and how naltrexone can help them. And it's a safe medication. I mean, it's something that by now really should have just been over the counter. I mean, you should be able to check out at your grocery store and say, oh, there's some energy pills and some Advil, and oh, what's that naltrexone? There's a little picture of a glass of wine on it. Is that going to help me stop drinking? Oh, let me get some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great point. And I know that Jenny at the C3 Foundation has a petition into the FDA to make it an over-the-counter drug. But, of course, I'm sure that's a long process, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. But, to your point, I think one of the beauties of naltrexone and TSM is it doesn't require any kind of formal diagnosis. It doesn't require for any kind of rock bottom. It doesn't require, it really you to tell anybody that you're even doing this method, right? You can do it in complete privacy and discretion without even your immediate family members knowing, right? And so it really lends itself to the whole spectrum of problematic drinking, really from, just over drinking, alcohol abuse, and gray area drinking, all the way to severe alcohol use disorder and everything in between. The medication could even work potentially prophylactically, say, for a young adult who knew that they had alcohol use disorder in their family could take it really preventatively, before they go
Yeah.
out to a college party, so that, they, wouldn't overdrink and drink, to blackout. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things, one of the short acting effects of the medication that naltrexone is well known for and does really well, is it prevents binge drinking.
Yeah.
Even in the moment, even long before someone reaches pharmacological extinction, which is truly the end goal with TSM, even in the moment in a drinking session, naltrexone will curb the urge to overdrink. And so what people find is they just drink more slowly. They're not gulping their drinks. They're not looking for the next drink. They're feeling full. And they're just not feeling kind of like they want to keep going,
Yeah.
which is really common. One of the indicators of alcohol use disorder is that feeling of compulsivity once you have the first drink. And you hear a lot about that in AA, that first drink, if you have that first sip, all bets are off. And to a certain degree, I think with people with alcohol use disorder, that's true. I think subjectively, most of us that have struggled with alcohol have kind of had that experience of having that first drink and that not feeling like it's enough. I want the next one, and maybe even the next one and the next one, right? And so naltrexone really does that well in terms of curbing that compulsive desire to keep going once you have the first drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to your point, it could be used all the way across the spectrum, and from anywhere from being preventative all the way to somebody who's drinking 24 hours a day around the clock. Now, that being said, somebody on the more severe end of the spectrum, it's going to take a little bit more, of course, more time, but it's also going to take a little bit more working with a therapist or a coach or a doctor to time the medication properly to make sure that you don't get thrown
Yeah.
into alcohol withdrawals, because the medication actually can work so well that people who are really heavy drinkers can stop drinking so quickly that they could go into alcohol withdrawal. So,
Yeah.
people that are on the more severe end of the spectrum do need more monitoring with, preferably a physician who can kind of monitor those symptoms and make sure that the medication is helping them taper at a pace that isn't going to throw them into any kind of, physical danger.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish that we had naltrexone when I was in college, and it's kind of frustrating thinking about it because it was around then. Although I think it was, I went to college in the late 80s, 87, so I think it was approved for opioids, but probably not for alcohol yet. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't an alcoholic, but probably like a lot of college students, you go to a party or a place where people are drinking, and it's stressful. There's, a lot of people around, you don't know most of the people, and you just want to relax, and someone gives you a drink, and then you're like, wow, this is great. I'm all relaxed and I can talk to people easier. If a little bit is good, maybe another one is going to be even better. And, next thing you know, you've had too much, and, the party's not fun anymore. You can't find your way home, and you wake up with a headache. And, at least for me, one day I just said, that's enough. I'm sick of it. And fortunately, I was able just to stop and kind of haven't really, I might have a sip of champagne here and there. And that's a great thing again, with the Sinclair method, is that, you don't have to tell someone. You never have to have a sip. You can never have champagne at New Year's again. If you want to have that sip of champagne, you can have it just at 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Take your naltrexone, then midnight you can have your glass of champagne or sip it. But there's just so much use for this. But yeah, like early on, I mean, kids in college, they could benefit from Thrive. Kids that just are maybe getting a B or C in a class, and in their average, and they could do a little bit better, and maybe they don't connect the two things. Partying too much on the weekend. Starting Thursday through Sunday or whatever, and then they go to class Monday with a hangover, and they don't drink the rest of the week. They could really benefit. Because not everybody really wants to get. You do get that compulsion. I mean, I don't think you have to be an alcoholic to get that thing where you just don't realize, you just keep going and drinking a little bit too much every time you start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's got a broad range of uses, and to your point of, most people that we work with don't have abstinence as a goal.
Yeah.
Either they just don't want that lifestyle, or they don't think they can have comfortable abstinence. And so I would say, probably 90% of the people that we work with come in with a goal of moderate drinking and controlled drinking. And that's what the medication does really well, frankly. I mean, it does help people drink in control. And that is what a lot of people are looking for. And I think that a lot of the mainstream treatments are really missing the boat, right? They're pushing abstinence on people who they reject that, right? And I think a lot of the denial that we see, kind of traditionally what we call denial with people with alcohol use disorder, is really just denial of the treatment options, not denial of the problem. I have found in my work, I've been working in this field for over a decade, that most people are pretty aware that they have a problem on some level. They just don't see themselves going into an abstinence-based treatment program. And so the lack of options for them to resolve this problem becomes, what we would traditionally call denial, right? Because they're denying not necessarily that they have a problem, but that they, should go into this one size fits all solution, which really, frankly, for most people doesn't work, right? For a number of different reasons, because, we all know people who have had long periods of abstinence, but they're still craving alcohol, and they're still having to go to meetings, and they're still resentful towards other people that could drink. And in my book, they're still addicted, right? Even if they've had long periods of time of abstinence, if they're still obsessing about alcohol, that's still a form of addiction, right? And naltrexone really kind of turns that whole model on its head, right? It really works on the neurological level so that people don't feel drawn to alcohol anymore. It really just helps it find the proper place in your life, or no place at all, right? So when something becomes less desirable, it's not hard to not do it anymore, right? And that's what naltrexone really does. It takes the shine off of alcohol, right? It takes the appeal out of it. So it's just kind of, doesn't really, it's an indifference. It doesn't really have the draw that it used to have. And I know it's really hard to describe that feeling to people who are still in the throes of AUD, but it really is like a fading away over time of just it not being really important anymore. And I know for me what happened, and I've seen this happen with other clients, not always, but for me, I actually lost the taste for alcohol. Like the taste doesn't appeal to me at all anymore. And I think back to, my first drinking experiences as a young teenager, and most people's drinking experiences, in the beginning, it's very sweet and fruity drinks, right? Because alcohol itself is not something that a child would taste and want to have more of, right? It really is a learned taste, and we learn it because it gives us this big endorphin rush. So we learn to like it because we associate it with the way we feel, but really, truly, the taste of alcohol is not that great. And so, a lot of people, when they start on this method, they notice that they lose the taste for their favorite drink, or lose their taste for alcohol altogether, where it just doesn't taste good anymore, right? And then, if something doesn't taste good, it's not that difficult to let it go out of your life, right?
Yeah. One of my patients described it as when she took her first naltrexone and then an hour later a drink, she said it made the alcohol taste like she had just brushed her teeth before drinking.
Yeah, it does give it, especially wine. It gives it a really vinegary taste. Which is interesting. Is that how it really does taste? And
Yeah.
naltrexone is kind of giving you that real experience of what alcohol tastes like, or it is a kind of interesting phenomenon, but it's pretty common. I mean, it's just one of those things that one of the benefits of naltrexone over time is it causes you to want to do other things other than drink, right? Because it's not fun anymore. You don't get the endorphin rush. It doesn't really taste that good. And so why bother, right?
Yeah.
And that's where most people end up. If, kind of circling back to what we were talking about before, I'd say 90% of people don't have abstinence as an end goal. What we find is that, if you follow the Sinclair method long enough and you're consistent with it over a period of months and even years, many people end up being abstinent just as a gradual, non-intentional thing of just like alcohol just continues to fade out of their life and out of their lifestyle. till they're virtually abstinent, and we do have clients who maybe, like you said, will have champagne once or twice a year at a wedding, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be this, big black and white thing like traditional treatment told us, if you're abstinent and you have a sip of champagne, well, you're starting over again on day one, right? That's not the case with naltrexone and TSM. And there are people who still drink alcohol on a regular basis. They're just not drinking excessively. They're staying in control. They're not drinking typically on a daily basis, maybe, weekly or monthly. And they're taking naltrexone first. So they're continuing their gains and continuing to
Yeah.
protect their brain from relearning the addiction, but they're able to enjoy a drink socially if they choose. And so
Yeah.
TSM gives people the freedom to continue to have the social ritual of alcohol and continue to have that social lubricant, if you will, because, although naltrexone does block the euphoria from alcohol, it doesn't block the other effects of alcohol. And that's, I think, really important for people to realize. It doesn't prevent intoxication, and it doesn't prevent the other, what people would call pleasurable effects of alcohol, the social disinhibition, relaxation, and those types of things are still present. The naltrexone is just blocking the euphoria, which is the addictive component of alcohol. So people can still enjoy alcohol, enjoy it in a social context, but they feel like they're back in control and they don't overdrink anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense also. That, I mean, there are things that are intoxicating that are not especially pleasurable at all. If you take Benadryl, it'll make you really sleepy, but nobody's like really abusing Benadryl. I mean, so there's like, a person, it makes sense that you could still have the effects of alcohol without like you know, that pleasurable desire to keep drinking because it's such a great feeling. Um, and in fact, if it seems like there's a lot of things that people do that they're driven by the reward center in their brain to do them. And if you take that away, they just seem ridiculous. It's like, why would I go to a casino and keep pulling on a handle, sitting in a chair all night, throwing money in the garbage, and just, because you're really not going to win long term. So, but there's people that sit there and they get that pleasurable thing when the thing lights up and makes all the music, all the noise and the environment, you get that endorphin rush, and there's a pleasure to throwing money away in a casino. And, when you eat, when people are already full or they're not hungry and they're eating chip after chip, it just it's a lot of work chewing on food. I mean, going to buy the food, take it out, prepare it, and chew on it. It's like swallow it. It's like that's a lot of work. Like that's a strange thing to be doing if you don't need to do it. And when you take the pleasure out of a lot of pleasurable activities, they just seem like ridiculous. But yeah, I can see. But then we went on a trip to Ireland a few years ago, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was way before COVID. But when we were there, we wanted to go to the Guinness brewery, and just not because we all wanted to get drunk on Guinness beer, but we wanted to take the tour and look around. And the kids wanted to the whole family, the kids wanted to go in, and it was really interesting how they make the beer. We walked around, we saw where they have like the secret safe where well, it wasn't the real safe, it was like what it looked like, and they had the waterfall and everything, and you go through the whole tour, and the end of the tour you go up to this it's not a restaurant, but whatever you call it, like where they have the main bar at the top. And if you look on YouTube, you'll see the celebrities that go up there and they're drinking the beer with the big foam on it and everything. And so we were like, we were excited to go up there, and my wife wanted to try the beer. I wasn't that excited about it, but I tasted the foam on the top, and I was thinking, for an alcoholic, you could go to Ireland and completely miss this experience, because you probably would be thinking like, I can't go in there. I might have one sip and I'm done. That's the end of it. And if you hang around a barber shop, you're going to get a haircut. They have all these sayings. You can't even go near there. It's like a vampire going in a church. You just have to stay away. But, you just miss out on all that history, and, just the interesting thing of that this is a major part of that country and their culture. And, someone on the Sinclair method could just take a pill and go in there and not worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, because if you look at both people who are actively drinking, right, that would be a problematic scenario for them, right? Because they might be afraid that they'd overdrink, that would trigger overdrinking. But it's also a problematic scenario for someone who is abstinent and who is, who is, gone through a traditional kind of treatment and can't drink at all, they would have a problem just being even in that atmosphere, right? Because it would
Yeah.
induce cravings, it would induce resentment towards other people who are being able to drink. And so
Yeah.
it's a problem for, you know, that kind of scenario could be a problem for either of those spectrums. Whereas with the Sinclair method, you have just the freedom. You could go in and you could have a, you know, a taste of beer or a little bit of beer, not worry about losing control, and also not feeling resentful towards other people who are
Yeah.
drinking. You know, and case in point, I mean, I think, you know, when I first started the Sinclair method, I was working as a health and wellness coach, but one of my hobbies, I had a hobby job, and that was being an international tour manager. So I would take people on tours to Europe. And the company I worked for at the time, we mostly did tours in Italy. And so they were very much, you know, wine based. So I'd go lead these tours for, you know, 10 or 14 days, and I'd be taking a group around Italy, and we'd be stopping and doing wine tastings. We'd have wine at dinner every single night. You know, people are on vacation, they're in Europe, and here I am, I was the tour manager, so I had to maintain control, you know, and make sure that the group flowed smoothly and everything. And so I didn't have the luxury of over drinking at all. And, you know, prior to the Sinclair method and naltrexone, those were real struggles for me, because I had to drink a little bit in order to, you know, be part of the wine tasting and be part of my group as we're traveling. But I was always worried about over drinking and keeping myself in check because I was the leader of the group, right? And I started the Sinclair method while I was still leading these tours, and it gave me the ability to feel confident in my ability to lead these tours, have a few sips of, I take my naltrexone, have a few sips of wine, and not feel the compulsion to keep drinking, or, you know, be able to have a glass of wine at dinner with my guests, you know, and not feel like I, you know, was worried about what was going to happen if I, you know, be able to keep my wits about me to pay the bill properly and walk them back to the hotel in the evening. So I think it's particularly for people who have alcohol as part of their career. You know, you think of sommeliers, sommeliers, is that how you say it? People who are wine specialists, and, you know, people work in breweries or the restaurant industry. You know, it's very difficult to imagine, you know, not being able to ever have a drink again. And so for those people, you know, also that Sinclair method is really appealing to them, because it allows them to continue to play their role in their career, which involves alcohol, but not lose control when they do drink.
Yeah. Yeah. When I've seen you know, people discussing naltrexone and the Sinclair method and, you know, in forums online, I see that some people I mean, some people don't have easy access to naltrexone, you know, depending on what country they're in, or their doctor, or, you know, different situations. And, you know, it's frustrating if you go to the doctor and you go through all the trouble to go to the doctor and you just want to ask for naltrexone, and then you bring it up and, you know, they might be completely confused. They might look it up and see the word opioid, even though it's an opioid receptor blocker. It's in no way addicting, but, you know, in the rush of having to go in and out of patient rooms, and, you know, the doctor looks at it, they're like, there's something off about that. You know, I don't want to get into treating alcoholism, you know, because this person's at high risk for drinking too much and damaging their liver, maybe dying or something. And I'd rather just not be part of, I'd rather just, you know, tell them to go to AA and be done with it. Or there might be doctors who would have been willing to write the prescription, but, you know, they don't want to put on the prescription, you know, follow Sinclair method, take a pill, then have a drink an hour later. I think some doctors imagine in their head, like getting a call in the middle of the night, you know, police officer saying, we found this person's body here and they're surrounded by liquor, and here's a bottle of pills with your name on it that says take a pill and drink. And you know, so doctors are a little bit nervous about the whole thing. But I think a lot of doctors will be willing to give someone a prescription, but then people get mad. They're like, why isn't this doctor on board and, you know, telling me how to take it properly on the instructions? But once you get the prescription, you know, a person, now they have it in their hand, I guess that, you know, that might be a moral dilemma for some people. You know, my doctor told me to take it this way, but Sinclair method is this other way. I mean, how do you feel about that if someone comes into the Thrive community or comes to you and says, my doctor said take it every morning and don't drink at all, but I want to follow the Sinclair method and I have a bottle of 30 or 90 pills. What do I do now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, you know, we do live in a day and age where, you know, with the internet, people are able to self-research. And so that's, you know, been a big positive for most people. They're able to do their own research and be their own health advocates, which I think people should be anyway. You know, doctors aren't gods, right? So I think that it is each person's responsibility to take care of their own health and own that. Um, you know, on the flip side, I understand that's not an easy conversation often to have with your primary care physician, and general practitioners are often not familiar with either the medication itself, or if they are familiar with the medication, how to use it properly. And the Sinclair method is an off-label use of medications. Many medications are used off-label for many different things, as we all know. And so it's not an anomaly for someone to use a medication off-label. But I think for the most part, we try not to get into a conversation where we would be contradicting physicians' recommendations. What we try to do is educate people and let them make the choice. And show them the statistics that show, targeted use of naltrexone is much more effective than daily use of naltrexone. And here are the reasons why. And let them make their own choice and make their own decision. And we also, we provide referrals inside our community once people join our program to physicians that we have vetted, that we know that are, familiar with the Sinclair method and how to use it properly, and, how to mitigate side effects and all those things that come along with that. So we really steer people in that direction. We have access to physicians in all 50 states, Canada, and some parts of, other parts of the world as well. So we, have a pretty robust list of resources. And then the C3 Foundation, as you are aware, also is doing outreach all the time to educate new physicians on this method, so that the availability is getting better and easier. But like you said, really it shouldn't be a problem for a GP to write a prescription, because really naltrexone is such a benign medication, such a safe medication. It's been FDA approved since 1994, I believe, for alcohol use disorder. And one of the physicians that, we partner with once told me, he feels like, in his opinion, naltrexone is as safe as, say, Advil or ibuprofen.
Right.
And so it's got a very good safety profile. If you look back, and again, it's, been approved for a long, long time. So there really shouldn't be any reason why a physician would not want to prescribe the medication itself. But as you mentioned, some physicians just probably wouldn't even want to go there. They would not feel like they had the bandwidth to follow through with somebody, which is partially true, right? I mean, we do see also, we want to make naltrexone available to as many people as possible, and also, through using the Sinclair method. But there are people who, simply just rely only on the medication and don't do anything else. They just take a pill and they expect it to be a magic pill or a panacea. And although, if they're taking it through the protocol, they typically will see a change in their drinking, because the medication does work. But if they don't do any other kind of lifestyle change, or make any kind of effort to change their beliefs around alcohol, or the way they live, or what they do for fun, they usually typically will plateau at a certain point, and still be drinking probably more than they might want to, unless they really start addressing kind of the underlying issues of why they started drinking heavily in the first place, and how to change their lifestyle so that they're not turning to alcohol for pleasure, relief, boredom, coping, and those kinds of things.
Yeah. One thing I want to make sure that we talk about, and you talked about it a little bit, that you've been through a lot of training for addiction, and I looked into that at one point, of going back to do a fellowship or a residency in addiction, become board certified in addiction. And I know some doctors that get really interested in it. They want to become certified and credentialed, and have that after their title is addiction board certified addiction specialist. But those organizations are very much involved with the 12 steps and AA and NA, and the 12-step philosophy has kind of hijacked addiction treatment and credentialing and education all throughout the system. So with Narcotics Anonymous, which came out of Alcoholics Anonymous, for people that didn't feel comfortable raising their hand and saying I'm an alcoholic, when they're smoking crack or shooting up heroin, although they might still also have an alcohol problem. In 1996, they had a pamphlet that was very specifically against methadone, to say that they don't agree with the methadone program of taking, although a lot of people in NA have, methadone saved their lives, and then they had to struggle to get off of that. A much more recent um, Narcotics Anonymous pamphlet, there's a paragraph that, and I used to think this was against Suboxone specifically, or against buprenorphine for opioid use disorder. But when you think about what it says, though, I think it's saying something much more than that, which is kind of ominous, with the Sinclair method and the use of naltrexone, even for opioids. It says, as we stated previously, NA has no opinion on the practices of any organization or practitioners outside NA. However, within the context of NA and its meetings, we have generally accepted principles, and one is that NA is a program of complete abstinence. By definition, medically assisted therapy indicates that medication is being given to people to treat addiction. In NA, addiction is treated by abstinence and through application of the spiritual principles contained in the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. So when you think about what they're saying there, they don't mention a drug at all. And it kind of covers every drug. They don't believe in any drug being used to treat addiction whatsoever. Even if you could give an Advil, and in fact, these days they're finding a lot of drugs for other things that actually work for addiction. What's that? There's that one for nausea that ondansetron.
Yeah,
Yeah,
low dose ondansetron is showing a lot of promise. One of the doctors that we work with, Dr. Umhau, is really very excited about low dose ondansetron, and especially bringing it into third world countries where
yeah,
not as difficult to get. And there seems to be, some genetic differences in people and what kind of drugs they
yeah,
respond. Non-dansetron has a very definite genetic profile for certain people that it will work well for in low doses for addiction. So yeah, I think
yeah,
there's ketamine, there's
yeah,
psychedelics these days. Spirolactine was recently in the news. Then we
yeah,
have the camprosate and topramax and
yeah,
these other medications that can be used collaboratively with naltrexone
yeah,
potentially, and also can help with craving reduction. So I think there's a lot of promise in the future. There may even be something. Naltrexone is very well tolerated and has a very high success rate for AUD,
yeah,
particularly. It's 80%. But there may be another medication that comes out in the future that works more quickly with less side effects, and people don't have to take it forever. I mean, so I think,
yeah,
right now is what we focus on in our program because it just works. And we've seen it
yeah,
over and over again that it works for people. But, certainly on the horizon, not just for alcohol use disorder, but for other addictions, there are lots of promising medications on the horizon.
yeah,
Because it's not it's not a one size fits all
yeah,
disorder. People develop addictions to all kinds of things. I mean, my perfect example, I had a food addiction, right? I mean, that's very difficult to treat, because you can't abstain from food, right?
yeah,
So I think that, as we gain knowledge in the field of addiction, I think we'll come to see, and we already are coming to see that it isn't just, one thing, right? It's a myriad of different forces that come
right,
together to cause addiction in people. And certainly the physiological component is very strong. Cravings are the number one cause of relapse for people who are abstaining from alcohol. So, certainly we want to address those physiological issues in the brain. But there are other components too. And spirituality is one of them. For some people, not for everyone, but certainly for those people that have that connection, that can be a healing force, absolutely. But it's a shame that these organizations that have so much influence are
yeah,
making kinds of statements like this, that all medications are kind of off the table. And I've even
yeah,
heard, unfortunately, of people who've been in AA meetings who have been advised to go off of their antidepressants and off
oh yeah,
other things that have really thrown people into problematic state, right? So I try not to criticize 12-step programs, because that's all
yeah,
that there was for the longest time. And I think the intention of those programs from the founders were good. And interestingly enough, just a quick backstory, I mean, Bill Wilson, who was the founder of AA, some of his revelations about AA came from him taking LSD. And not a lot of people know that backstory, but he had that spiritual awakening as a result of taking LSD, which is a really kind of ironic, backstory,
Yeah.
being the person the A is taking now. But so again, I try not to criticize it too much because it has helped some people. But I think if we look at the success rates, they're very low. We're talking, 10-15% maybe over a long period of time. And on the flip side of that, that means that there's, 80% of people or more who are engaging in these programs and not getting help. And the thing that what I see that has happened, a lot of people that come to TSM from the AA world, is they really lose hope because they're being told that, this is the one pathway, this is the one right way. And, if it doesn't work for them, and many people have, tried and failed, dozens of times, right? They give up. They give up trying, they give up hope. They internalize it and feel like, there's something just horribly wrong with them. And some of the principles reinforce that. We talk about powerlessness and character flaws and having an identity as someone who's addicted to a substance. I think though all those for me are kind of problematic because they keep people stuck in the problem indefinitely, right? They don't allow people to move past their problem and their issue and go on to live their life. And that's one of the things I love about TSM is, people go through this process, they reach extinction, they find a healthy relationship with alcohol or stop drinking altogether, and then they go on and live their lives. They don't have to go to meetings forever. They don't have to keep battling cravings. They don't have to keep fighting this fight. Like, this is a one and done thing. If you do it, if you go through the process and get to extinction and continue to follow the protocol, if you choose to drink at all, you don't have to deal with this problem over and over again. It doesn't have to be something that haunts you. You certainly don't have to, call yourself a name or a label that's stigmatizing, right? And so people go on and they move past this problem in their life, which to me is like a real beautiful thing, right? Because that's what we really want. That's the whole goal, is to put this problem in your past and go on and live your life, and go on and do other things, right? So
Yeah.
that to me is a huge difference. And what this medication naltrexone does really well is it really does heal the brain and returns it back to the pre-addicted state. And it's different than if you look at methadone and Suboxone and buprenorphine. They are only partial agonist opiate blockers, and so there is some level of potential continuing addiction with those particular substances that doesn't exist with naltrexone.
Yeah.
So naltrexone, it should not necessarily be put in the same category as something like Suboxone or methadone, because it really has zero addictive properties at all. So there's no like tapering off of naltrexone or anything like that. You use it as needed. So in the beginning, when people first starting to take the medication, typically they're drinking fairly frequently. They're taking the medication more often, but as they're drinking less and less frequently, they're taking the medication less and less often. And then, the end result is someone, if they're drinking once a month, they take the medication once a month. If they're drinking once a year, they take it once a year. That's very sustainable for most people, as opposed
Yeah.
to saying, you've got to take this medication every day forever, or, you've got to taper off this medication because now you're addicted to something else secondarily. That just isn't the case with naltrexone. It very much becomes just a very occasional thing. Or if people choose to not drink at all and live alcohol free, you never have to take it again.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, yeah. About the Thrive community, sometimes people don't, the Sinclair method seems really straightforward, that you take a pill an hour before you have a drink and do that like maybe every day at first, maybe every few days or whenever you're going to have a drink. But you can kind of summarize it like in a sentence or a short paragraph. Um, but people, and they try it, the first time, they're like, wow, that really works. Like, I might do that again one day. And then they kind of put it in the back burner. But, it reminds me of, like, when I used to take piano lessons, and I haven't taken them for decades. And I used to be a lot better when I took piano lessons because I had that piano teacher, coach. I mean, well, they call him a piano teacher, but, they point out what I'm doing wrong. I had to make sure I was prepared for the next lesson. They would guide me in how to play, how to practice. And, so why don't I take lessons now? I don't feel like paying a piano teacher $100 a week and going to a lesson. But I was thinking, if a piano teacher told me, "How about you pay me $1,000 and I'll be your teacher as long as the two of us are alive, just forever. I'll be your teacher every week we can meet." I'm like, wow, that's an incredible deal. That'll pay for itself in 2 months, and then we'll just keep going. Um, and I heard that you guys have like a lifetime deal that people can have you guys as their Sinclair Method coach and support community forever if they sign up for like a one-time thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and that was intentional. When Katie and I started this, we really were trying to look at what we would have needed and what the clients that we had worked with really, what did they really need to be successful, right? And what we found is that because compliance is such a critical issue on the Sinclair method, it's so essential that once you start taking this medication, that you do follow the protocol very consistently. It's one of those things that I say, it's the Sinclair method is simple, but it's not always easy, right? And so that compliance piece is so essential that people do dabble with it or try it once and kind of stop taking the medication and then try it again and until they really get it. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times where they see the medication's working, then they stop taking it, they kind of go backslide, and then they
Yeah.
maybe take it again and then before they really commit to compliance. And so we wanted to not give an end date or pressure for people to reach any certain goal at any certain time. We wanted to leave that open-ended because the time frame with naltrexone, just the extinction process itself, ranges anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. And there's a very wide variation depending on the individual's, just their physiology and of course their drivers, what their drivers are for drinking, and then what their support system is, what their beliefs around alcohol. There's so many different facets in addition to the physiology that play a role in why people are still turning to alcohol as a coping tool. So we wanted to give that kind of, end as long as it takes, right? And in our program, we do focus on the protocol. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on using the medication correctly and how to have extinction sessions and, how to stay compliant. But we also do want to take people kind of past that point too, of, looking towards their future. What is their vision for themselves after they're not addicted to alcohol anymore? What are some of their goals along the way and some of their bigger life goals? What is their identity around alcohol? What do they believe about alcohol? What is their lifestyle? What do they come home and do at the end of a long, hard day to relax instead of alcohol, right? And so relearning kind of these new tools is a big part of our program as well, because you take alcohol out of your life and you create this vacuum. You've got to fill it with something to be fulfilled, right? And so we really wanted to give people something that took them past just naltrexone and extinction and into living a thriving life, right? And so that is the reason why we decided to make it a lifetime program. And in addition to that, we find that people who reach extinction with TSM and find success, really a large portion of them want to stay connected to the community and give back and really advocate for this method to other people and be an encourager. And so, we have hired coaches in Thrive who are success stories of TSM for that reason, because, there's having gone through the experience yourself, that's irreplaceable. You could go to school and get educated, and become, get an advanced degree. But if you don't have that personal experience, sometimes it's hard to relate to the struggles of what people are going through. And so, one of the things that was part of our mission is to really hire people to help us in Thrive who have that personal experience of TSM themselves and who have reached success. And then we just have a lot of also just kind of volunteers in our group who have reached success and are just so enthusiastic about this method that they just really want to just give back to new people who are coming on board. And so we do see people staying in the community for longer, even after extinction, just to give encouragement because they're so excited about spreading the word about this treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, if I had an issue with alcohol, I'd sign up right away because, I mean, even if someone is trying other things, they're reading books, they're watching different videos in different places, they're going to the C3 Foundation to look at their material. It can't hurt to have extra support in different areas. And and I'm a big fan of any kind of lifetime deal. And my thought would be, and not that you're planning this, I know you're not, but say in a year or two you decide that the lifetime model doesn't work, but you'll probably honor I mean, I'm sure you'll honor all those early sign up people. I'd want to make sure I get in now, like say a few years down the road and you change that, at least I'm locked in. So but I'm always looking for those kinds of lifetime deal things. So yeah, I would think, and sometimes you get in, you sign up, and then you're like, well, I signed up, I'm not quite ready yet, but I might be ready next year. And I've done that. I've bought into these lifetime software deals, and then the lifetime deal ends, and now it's month to month for everybody else. But 2 years down the road, I'm like, I'm ready now. I remember that thing I bought into. I really want to use it now, and now it's there for me. Um, but yeah, I would definitely recommend, people should just get in now while they can, and and get started. But don't put off the program for 2 years, because the best time, alcohol is just not a good thing for anybody. People should like try to cut back now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, I think, I don't foresee us changing that because really, again, if you look at the model of what we're teaching, is that, it is going to be time limited just by nature, right? Because
Yeah,
people are going to reach extinction, they're going to rebuild their life, and then they're going to go out and live their life, right? So they're not going to need the resources forevermore. They have
yeah,
them for as long as they want. And, again, if people, like you said, sometimes people just, they purchase something on the spur of the moment, but they're not really ready to make that change yet. They can re-enter or re-engage at any point in time in the future. And
yeah,
so, we really are, we really try to just, we understand it's an investment for people to invest in our program, but we really are, sometimes I feel like we want their success more than they do.
yeah,
But we really do want, we want every member who joins us to find success with the Sinclair method. And so we try to give every resource available that we see that would be helpful to people. So everything from, we have courses, we have over 40 video modules that are sequential. So they take people step by step through the protocol and then step by step through rebuilding their life as they're approaching extinction. But we also have group support meetings, which are a big draw for people, where they several times a week they can go in and meet with others that are going through the journey alongside them, and have access to a TSM coach, so you can ask questions, and the meetings are all facilitated by a TSM coach. So we offer those regularly. And then we also have regular workshops that go into one more specific topic. So recently we did one on harm reduction in the holidays. We have a therapist who's a TSM specialist as well, who's going to do a whole series of workshops on underlying trauma and that kind of thing. And so I think, we really are trying to meet all the needs of our members, right? Because remembering that people start drinking problematically for different reasons, right? And so some people just have the bad habit of drinking, and they have, the genetic combination that they just develop a drinking problem, but the rest of their life's still in order, right? They still have good support. They're financially doing okay. Their career is still intact. Those kinds of things. But this drinking's kind of the problem, right? Other people find that as they're going through the process and approaching extinction, maybe they have underlying childhood trauma. Maybe they have underlying anxiety and depression or other mental health issues. Maybe they don't have a good support system, or, their finances are unstable, or other factors in their life that contributed to their drinking problem, but are still there. Even though now they're going through extinction, those underlying issues are still present. And now in some sense, they're amplified, right? Because now they don't have alcohol as a coping tool. And so for those people, working through those underlying issues is part of the process, right? Because those are times where people are tempted to drink non-compliantly, for instance. So sometimes we see people that go through this process, they're making great strides, and something happens in life. Some kind of dramatic event, they lose their job, or their dog passes away, or something like that happens, and they decide to drink non-compliantly because they just want to feel the relief and the euphoria, and then they kind of fall off the protocol, right? So that's not an uncommon scenario. one of the things about, our program is we still have this container, right, where we can help them get back on the protocol again, rather than just kind of going back into their old patterns and not really having any support or resources to, re-engage in the protocol. So, there's lots of different reasons why having the support can be critical to success for people, not just in knowing how to use the protocol correctly, because that information's out there if you research, but the accountability piece, kind of like you mentioned, the checking in weekly, right? The being able to listen to other people's success stories, hear what challenges that they've gone through and how they resolve them. Remembering that this is for most people a year-long process. So to stay self-motivated for any kind of long-term change like that, most of us have, had been exposed to some kind of, life change. Either, we're trying to get fit or we're trying to lose weight or those kinds of things. And you realize that, it isn't something that's done in a month or 2 months. This is a long-term lifestyle change that, most change takes, a year to kind of solidify. And TSM is no different than that. And so, having that support system for that full year where you have a place to go ask questions and hear other people's challenges and struggles and solutions, and then have access to a coach where you can, get more personalized attention for anything that you're going through the process, can really make the difference between succeeding and not succeeding for many people.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds great. And it's we just got through the holidays, and I imagine there's a lot of people that struggled with drinking or not drinking. And I love the idea of, like, seeing family we haven't seen for a long time, and showing off, like, oh, look how great things are going. I just imagine someone who drinks, normally everybody's looking at this one person in the family. Oh, look, he's gonna have a glass of wine and he'll be off drinking the whole bottle, and he's gonna embarrass himself. And, like, imagine how fun that would be, just to show up to that Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, New Year's party, whatever, and just say, like, oh yeah, you think I'm gonna drink all night? Watch me. I can sip the same beer or wine all night, and that's it for me. Um, that's a great feeling. And, also to show up to the Thrive community meetings and say, look, it's working for me. I can't believe this is working. I'm drinking less. Look at my graph here. It's going down over time. And yeah, that's what, I think any program like that with accountability, Weight Watchers for people losing weight, like I always lose weight when I go there because I'm competitive. I'm like, I want the people to see, like, oh, look, 2 pounds down this week. Um, so I know you can't really measure, there's no objective measurement like a weight you can do for alcohol, but I guess people, you must have that app, right? Or you provide that information where people can track their drinking, because that's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
great.
The C3 Foundation has an app that's TSM specific. So they've developed that. So we do, steer people in that direction. But there are other apps that work as well. One of them is called Drink Control. So we typically steer people towards apps that are moderation friendly rather than abstinent friendly, because we don't really want people counting abstinent days, right, in
Yeah,
this program. It really doesn't really serve the purpose of TSM. So we definitely have certain apps that we steer people towards, but the C3 Foundation is a good solid one because they are
yeah,
grounded in the protocol.
yeah. And that's another thing is that, when you're if you go to like a 12-step program and you have like 12 years sober, 20 years sober, one sip, if you're honest with yourself and with the people in the meeting, you just show up and, like, I'm sorry, everybody, I had a sip of beer. I just threw away 20 years of sobriety and all of my authority in this meeting of being a leader in the community, and now I'm just a newcomer again. And it's kind of meaningless. I mean, and that, I think, can lead to someone going on a full binge. It's like, I already threw away 20 years. I might as well have some fun. Um, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think with the Sinclair method and moderation, and you never, as long as you take the pill before you drink, if you miss it one time, say you're that person, you can do it the next time and get back on track. But you're not really necessarily throwing away anything. I mean, it's not like you don't have to identify with sobriety time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, that's really, it's a really harsh way to measure success, right? That the black and white thinking doesn't work for a lot of people, right? And if you're, if you're put in that scenario and you've already failed, why not fail gloriously, right? So
Yeah.
people don't go on these binges, right? And so again, TSM kind of turns that on its end. It really doesn't have any of those kinds of artificial structures that really can really be harmful to people. It just really measures just progress and understanding that, progress for most humans isn't linear. I mean, we're human beings. Usually, most changes don't happen in a linear fashion where we're just continually making progress, right? We learn, we make mistakes, we revise, we try again. That's the way that humans learn and change, not just kind of making this absolute decision that, now we're going to change our life dramatically forevermore. For most people, that doesn't work. And so, yeah, to your point of kind of having to start over again after, having one sip of alcohol, it's really demoralizing and could really kind of lead to people kind of dropping out and not even trying anymore. So, yeah, so TSM is just such a radically different approach. Which is why it appeals to many people. There are many people that come to us have already just made the decision that AA, it hasn't worked for them. They've already tried it that way. They've maybe tried other things as well. And so, that's not an uncommon experience for people to be like, I tried this, and this, and none of these things have worked. And TSM often does work very quickly for those people, because here's the thing, when you're in the throes of cravings and addiction, it's really hard to implement tools, right? Tools to change, and even doing things like drink tracking and being mindful. And those things are very difficult when you're in the throes of cravings. And so what people often find is once they start TSM and start getting some distance from their cravings for alcohol, is they're able to start implementing these tools that maybe they've learned in other programs in the past. And Smart Recovery is a great one that I recommend to people because it's very complementary to TSM, and they're also medication assisted treatment friendly. So they will, support that. But, even AA has some value, right? There's some valuable things in AA. If you can glean those things, kind of take what works for you and leave the rest. What a lot of people find is that now all these tools that they've been trying to implement are able to get some traction in their life, because now they're not being driven by cravings, and they can actually have some space in their thoughts to think, do I really want this next drink? No, I really don't, right? But before, they were just kind of compulsively or unconsciously pouring that next drink without even being able to have that space to make the decision, right? They're kind of making it on an unconscious level. So, I often tell clients when they're starting TSM, maybe they've been through outpatient other programs and failed at them. And I try to really encourage them to reframe that as, they've learned all these strategies and they just haven't been able to implement them properly because they've been kind of sabotaged by their physiology. Now that the medication is in their system, they're going to start getting some space from those feelings, and they're going to be able to implement those tools again. And I do see that that happens often, is that people are like, now things are making sense. They're going to their therapist and things are clicking. The tools that they've learned in the past they're now able to put into practice in their life, and they really start making progress quickly.
Yeah. So, the Thrive community really sounds like an incredible thing that people can benefit from. If someone's interested in the Sinclair method to take naltrexone and slow down their drinking, get their drinking under control. I think that'd be a great first step, looking you guys up and seeing what it's all about. What would be like the best place to go first? Is there a website that people can go to?
Yeah. We have a ton of free resources as well. So, you don't necessarily have to enroll in our program to access our free resources. But if you go to thrivealcoholrecovery.com, that's our homepage. We have, again, some free videos on there. We have lots of information about the Sinclair method and how it works, some success stories, some endorsements, and those kinds of things. So Thrive Alcohol Recovery is our website. There's also the C3 Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization founded by Claudia Christian, who also, gives a ton of free resources and guidance. And even one thing that I really appreciate that they have on their website is they have printable documents that people can print out and take to their primary care physician. If they want to advocate for themselves and want to go get naltrexone from their primary care doctor, they can educate themselves and educate their doctor on this method. So that's a great resource as well.
Yeah. That sounds great. So, Karen, Dion, thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Leeds. It was my pleasure.